Hello, everyone. We are back. Welcome to our second panel discussion of Save and Raid. The theme of this panel is Breaking Barriers, Innovative Approaches to Suicide Prevention. And we'll be chatting with suicide prevention champions here on the screen about their unique approaches to preventing suicide. And if you're tuning in for the first time to a discussion panel, my name is Jen Owens. I'm the Director of Programs at Save. And joining me in moderating our discussion today is Courtney Lewis. She is a mental health registered nurse and part of our awesome Save and Raid organizing team.
So before we jump into the discussion, we do want to acknowledge that suicide is a deeply personal and sensitive topic, especially for those who are struggling or who have experienced a suicide attempt or who may have lost someone to suicide. Please take care of yourself during this discussion. And if you or someone you know is in crisis, please reach out for support. Pinned in this chat is a link to Twitch's crisis service directory. If a crisis service isn't available in your area, please connect with a trusted friend or a loved one. And remember, you are valued, you are needed, and we want you here with us.
Thank you, Courtney, for sharing that very important message. So as many of you may know, suicide is a complex and urgent public health challenge. Today, we're honored to bring together 3 leaders in pushing the boundaries of innovation and finding new ways to reach those in need. I have the privilege of introducing our 3 panelists today who will be sharing with us their exciting work. So first, we have Brad Bonar. He's the founder and CEO of 1 Degree of Separation, Inc. They are a nonprofit suicide prevention group that uses comedians to train audiences on how to talk about depression and suicide. They have performed over 200 suicide prevention events all around the world. Audiences have included middle schools, high schools, the FBI, high-ranking military personnel, and everything in between. They recently signed a contract with the Navy to perform 125 days of shows all around the world, and including on aircraft carriers. So pretty cool. So welcome, Brad.
That sounds so impressive. I'm impressed. Yeah, I love, there's a little bit of shock value in just what we do, that we do a comedy show about depression and suicide. And that's usually how I introduce it to people. Everywhere I meet, everywhere I go, everyone I meet, I say we do a comedy show about depression and suicide, and I get a range of reactions. It's part of it's the Scooby-Doo, you what? I've had people say, how dare you? Which means they have a personal story. And then when I tell them we do this for 6th graders, we do this for middle schools, this is real suicide prevention training, and we use comedians to talk about something nobody will talk about. And so people walk away with a real life skill and a comfort and having a conversation. But I like them to raise their eyebrows. I like the emotional response, because for a lot of people, they said, I saw what the name of your show was, because the full name is, it's 1 Degree of Separation, a funny look at depression and suicide. And people say, I saw the name of this and I went to your website. What are they doing? And then I saw what you're doing. And it's not what we don't make fun of suicide. But we use comedians to talk about it. 80% of comedians struggle with depression. And so who better than comedians? Because we have no boundaries. We'll talk about anything. And so we have a very specific window and bandwidth that we deal with. We don't do Q&A at the end of our shows. We don't give advice. We're not clinicians. We're not therapists. We're there just to teach you how to have a conversation. And so The format of our show, it's always 4 comedians. We now have teams of comics all over the country doing the show without me because it has a structure and a format. And the format, everybody comes out and does 5 minutes of comedy. Not mental health comedy, unless that's your thing. I just want 5 minutes, family friendly. I want everyone to laugh for the first 20 minutes. I literally want to dope the audience, get you full of endorphins and serotonin and dopamines, and that we've changed your brain chemistry for you to be able to receive. A kid with ADD, you get them to laugh for 20 minutes, they don't have ADD for a couple of hours. They're able to focus and listen. So everybody does their 5 minutes of comedy. Then we come back out. It's 4 bar stools, 4 microphones, and we answer 5 questions about depression. And those questions get passed out. We're actually going to get them made up on dog tags for the military. And the questions are your tools to have your own conversations. And now we're going to demonstrate what it looks like to answer these 5 questions. And the questions are, number 1, what does it feel like? Not your emotions, not you talk about grounding and mindfulness and getting somebody just to get grounded or where they're at. It also, with that question, you're acknowledging, I know this isn't just in your head. I know this is real. I know this is a real thing. Just by asking that simple question, just tell me what it feels like physically, your depression. The second question is a venting question. What do others do that makes it worse? We have therapists that work with kids that say, I can't get them to open up, but they'll answer these 5 questions. It's like, oh, I'll tell you what people do that makes it worse. The next question is a gratitude question. Well, then what do others do that makes it better? And we talk about, all of us answer this. We talk about, people just take something off my plate. People just sit with me through it. For some people, it's give me space. For other people, it's don't abandon me. You don't know until you have the conversation. The next question is a self-inventory question. And it's what do you do that makes it worse? And then it's acknowledging, okay, I lie. I say I'm fine when I'm not. I drink too much. I game too much. I isolate. Everybody has their own versions and answers of that. And the last question we answer is the positive one. Well, then what do you do that makes your depression better? And we talk about faith. For some people, it's getting out of church and getting closer to God. For some people, it was finding God. For some people, it was God had nothing to do with it. It was therapy and meditation and prayer or whatever it might be. But we just give lived experiences. It's funny. We use local comics when we travel all over the country, and I have to interview them and make sure that it's lived experience. It can't be, oh, I had depression because my mom died and then I was fine. This has to be part of your life. But sometimes I interview comics and I'll go, yeah, you're too happy. I'm sorry. You can't be on our show. Maybe if you have some more tragedy, give me a call, but it's got to be lived experience that you can share with this audience. Somebody always cries and then we make fun of them and we laugh and then we go back into this serious topic. But the end result is people leave with a comfort and an ability to have a conversation. But we don't do Q&A. We tell people at the end of the show, we're showing you how to talk about it, but don't talk to us because look at us. We're all messed up. Talk to professionals, and then we'll have resources like NAMI, local counseling services, VA groups, whatever the group is that we're performing for. What's amazing is that we do the same program for 6th graders that we do for the Marine Corps. We did the first show we did for the Army a couple of years ago. She said, so you do this for 6th graders, you're doing the Army today. How do you change your program? I go, we don't. The comedy will be a little different. If we're doing a school, it's going to be fart jokes and jokes about dogs and cats. But then when we get to these 5 questions, our answers don't change. They're very universal. We always have a very diverse panel, but honest to God, I tell people, I go, the diversity is just for the flyer. Because as soon as we start talking, none of that diversity matters. It doesn't matter that Sydney, one of our number 1 comics that we use, she's 26 and she's gay and she's butch. And when she talks about her depression, it's exactly like my depression. It doesn't matter that what culture, every culture thinks our people don't talk about it. And then they hear everybody talk and they go, oh, they don't talk. We've had people come up to us after our show and go, I never realized white people had the same depression. I didn't realize that your depression was the same as gay people's depression. It's like once we talk about it, it really is universal. What others do that makes it worse, what they do that makes it better, what we do that makes it worse, what we do that makes it better. These things really become more unifying and bring us all together. And the other big thing is that we get people to come out to these events that never would have come out to a mental health lecture. It really does open a lot of doors. And that's why when we do this for the military, this counts as their suicide prevention training for the year. So they can go watch a PowerPoint, or they can see four people talk about their struggles. When we do military, we always have a veteran or two on the show. We've done the Pride Festival, we've done the Dental Association, it doesn't matter. It's the same program, it's the same questions, and it's just been an amazing journey. And we're just where we want to be is I want to have teams of comics all over the country. I want the demand for us to be so great that I spend all my time training the comics on how to run their own shows, and that we make talking about this just such a normal. We want to be a change of culture, that it's okay to talk about this, and we're going to show you how to do it. So
I'm so glad you brought up kind of the universal experience of depression, even among diverse groups, because I feel like that kind of sets us up nicely to hear from Sara about her work and the group she's working with. So thank you for setting me up for an awesome transition there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I will introduce Dr. Sara Kohlbeck. She's an assistant professor and director of the Division of Suicide Research and Healing, Comprehensive Injury Center at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Dr. Kohlbeck is also an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Medicine and the assistant director of the PhD program in Public and Community Health at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Dr. Kohlbeck's research interests focus on understanding suicide from a public health perspective. Specifically, she is conducting research that focuses on better understanding suicide among disproportionately affected populations, including farmers, veterans, and youth of color. She's also engaged in community-based research with communities across the state of Wisconsin. So welcome, Sara, or Dr. Kohlbeck. We'd love to hear a little bit about your work.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and definitely call me Sara, the doctor thing. I am not a clinician. My background is in public health. And so I come to sort of this topic and this issue, I think, with a little bit of a different perspective than some of my clinical colleagues, definitely thinking about kind of how systems and environments in our culture, organizations impact and influence suicidal behavior. And so I want to talk to you about one of the projects that I've worked on that is kind of, I think, came from sort of my own personal experience and personal, I guess, outside work life. So I am a tattoo collector. I have many, many tattoos, and I've gotten tattoos all across many years of my life, and in particular during the pandemic. I think that was kind of a coping mechanism for me. And as I was sitting in the tattoo chair during a recent session, I was sort of pouring my heart out to my tattoo artist, like telling her all about, things that were happening in my life, talking to her about stressors I was facing related to work and family and my kids. And I was thinking to myself, this is a really great opportunity for folks to potentially receive and provide support if they're experiencing a mental health challenge or even suicidal thoughts. And I think really the premise for this is, spoiler alert, you don't need a million degrees or letters behind your name to provide support to somebody. And so really the work that we have done is around educating and preparing tattoo artists to be able to, identify potential, mental health challenges among their clients, and then just be prepared to have a sort of caring, supportive, non-clinical conversation with those folks, and then know about local resources in order to be able to, again, offer resources and navigate folks to those resources if that caring and supportive conversation maybe isn't enough. So we started out by interviewing tattoo artists just to see if this was a good idea. And of the tattoo artists that we surveyed, almost 2/3 of them have had at least one client at least one time express suicidal thoughts to them. So what that tells us is that this is a setting where this type of work is potentially needed. And so again, really that training and that support for artists is what we are focusing on now as part of the work that we do. This is very similar to folks might be familiar with some work that's been done in barbershops around public health prevention. Barbers are trained to, for example, in cities like Milwaukee, where I live, to do HIV counseling and prevention. We had barbershops that were really involved in COVID-19 vaccines, because these are folks in the community that people are engaging with, they're spending a lot of time with, they tend to develop a relationship with and a rapport with. And what a great opportunity, right? If folks are interested to sort of, again, provide that support to be able to support other people. And just have sort of that that means of support, meeting where people where they're at. And so, yeah, that's one of the projects that I'm working on, one of the projects that we're doing here in Milwaukee. Really excited. We partnered with a couple of tattoo shops here in Milwaukee to host events that we called Inked for Life, which were tattoo flash events where we had artists design tattoos that reflected mental health to them. We had flash events. Folks came in and had those pieces tattooed on them. We offered mental health resources, stigma reduction resources, and then raised money for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention as part of those events. So super excited, again, to be with you all tonight and to talk about this work, and hear about the great work that others are doing in this space.
Thank you.
So, thanks so much, Sara.
Yeah.
All right, and then our third panelist tonight is Kim Burdett. She's a senior manager for the Black Box Project at Stop Soldier Suicide. Kim is the surviving sister of USMC veteran John Hoffman, who died by suicide in April 2010. For over 13 years, she has dedicated her career to supporting suicide loss survivors and advancing prevention, intervention, and postvention efforts. Kim has extensive experience developing content, programming, events, and curriculum for survivors and those who support them. She currently serves as Senior Manager of Donor Engagement for the Black Box Project at Stop Soldier Suicide, a unique suicide prevention initiative for lost survivors. A lifelong New Englander, Kim is an assist trainer, holds a master's in social work, and facilitates online peer support groups for suicide loss survivors. So welcome, Kim, and we're happy to hear a little bit about your work.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and be able to get to tell you about the Black Box Project, but I want to go to a Tattoo for Life event, an Ink for Life event.
Sign me up.
We'd love to have you in Milwaukee.
Well, when they're, make them in New Hampshire and I'll be there.
Or, I would love to visit, so yes.
We'll talk. Yeah, so you heard in my bio, obviously how I came to this work after the loss of my only sibling in 2010. And, I think like most lost surviving families, we didn't have any context for suicide loss, or, John's story was not one of, years of attempts or years of struggle that we knew of anyway. But after his death, we just knew that, that day everything changed, and I had no idea how much everything changed that day, but I just knew I would do something with this. And my heart was always, from the beginning, always in, caring for and really, just sort of companioning, from a peer sense, those who are impacted by suicide loss. And then as I started working in the field, first volunteering, then working, and then learning, and sitting at the feet of everyone I could possibly sponge up information and learning from, I learned that, that's called postvention, caring for people impacted by this. And it's a form of prevention, because those of us exposed to suicide loss are at higher risk ourselves. And so, good postvention for that unique grief after suicide loss really is preventative in nature. And so that's really when I've been lucky enough to focus most of my work since then. So the project that I work on right now is really innovative. Really, I don't know of any other organization that's doing this. If they are doing it, we'd love to connect. But so I work for a nonprofit called Stop Soldier Suicide. And on the sort of clinical side of the house, what Stop Soldier Suicide does is provide free, confidential telemental health care to anyone who either is wearing or has ever worn a U.S. military uniform. Our clinicians are phenomenal. They are not in all 50 states, but we're getting there. And again, it's all telemental health. It's all free. They specialize in treating people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. So the majority of our people, our clients, are with us only 6 to 10 sessions. We kind of get them over that acute time and help them connect to other resources that they need to, to continue to get well. That's a real quick synopsis of what sort of the clinical side of the house is. I don't work on that side. I work on what's called our suicide intelligence platform side of the house, and that's where the Black Box Project lives. And if you think about the context of a black box, right? With recent news, we're all familiar with what a black box in aviation is. Except in this context, the black box is our digital devices. So what the Black Box Project does, and what I get to do, is connect with families like mine, who have been impacted by suicide loss. We borrow the digital devices of their loved one that died by suicide. Cell phones, tablets, and laptops is the majority of things that we are borrowing. And it's a borrow. We don't keep them. We copy the data that lives on them. We do not connect them to the internet at all. We prefer them to come to us either off or in airplane mode if possible. We copy the data that lives on them. It immediately, that data gets depersonalized and de-identified, and then it gets pooled. And then we are analyzing that pool of data with, all the other device data. And we're looking for behavioral trends and patterns in all of that data of people who have died by suicide. Because you can think about, if we can learn, and not in a over your shoulder kind of big brother watching you kind of way, but if we can learn what people are doing, in the hours, days, weeks, and months even before they die by suicide, you think about all of the places that interventions could be built, right? That, interventions could be created to get in there, right? And again, people's that acute period that people are suicidal, if you can just do whatever to get in there, to be a blocker, to get them over that hump, to to change that behavior in that moment, we think that there is incredible potential for this. And by the way, not just in the suicide prevention field. I can think of this could expand much larger than that. But when the project started, we were just working with families whose loved one was either military or a veteran. But just 2 months ago, we opened it up. And by that, I mean, we are now seeking devices and avidly seeking devices from anybody who has lost a loved one to suicide, regardless of if that person served or not, or their age, or what the circumstances were. Because again, this data we think is just so rich and is going to teach us so much. We're really, when we describe this, we say, it's going to help us better understand risk. What we learn from this data may confirm everything the field already knows, right? But it's just going to show us new ways to intervene. It may teach us some things that we don't even know yet, or it may tell us what we think we know is wrong, right? We're open to all of that. We're open to whatever this can teach us. So my role, as you could imagine, is to engage with the families. We know that this is a big ask, right? It is not a simple thing to take your loved one's, precious belonging. There's only so many belongings once someone is gone, right? And trust me enough to ship it off to our headquarters where our digital forensics lab is in North Carolina. So I build a little bit of a relationship, a rapport. I'm a social worker, so I share resources with them and, specific to grief, and connect them as much as I can. But, we know that it's a big ask. What I love about it, yes, it's super innovative. It's, the tech piece of it is really cool and interesting. And we have the latest and the greatest software to be able to attempt to unlock devices. I say attempt, it's not an exact science. It doesn't work every time, but we have a pretty high success rate. But what I love the most is that it allows families many of us, when we experience a suicide loss, we want to do something to prevent another family. If I can do anything that can prevent another family from experiencing what mine did and the heartache that my parents, that my family went through, we want to do it, right? This is a relatively easy way for someone to, to stand with us in prevention and, get a little bit, it's not going to heal everything. I'm not overselling it, but to feel a little bit of meaning and purpose out of what feels like a very meaningless loss, right? To reclaim a little bit of that. Our families tell us, it just feels good just to be able to help, to do something. And, we intend to share this with the entire suicide prevention field. When it's about 3 years old, the whole project. So we are still in the data collecting stage. We know we need data. We need a lot of data to make this as significant as we can. So yeah. So thanks for having me. And I would welcome any questions that anyone has about the project. And if I can't answer them, if it's so techie, I will just find someone who can and get back to you.
We do
Awesome.
have some.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Kim, for sharing that. I just want to say, anybody who's tuning in right now to this conversation, please drop any questions you have into the chat. Kind of sounds like some folks are already doing that, and I'll let Courtney kind of take over with some of those questions that are coming in. So go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, so we have some questions that are kind of specific to each of your projects and your work, but I wanted to start with kind of a broader question. I think each of you touched on this a bit, but I'd love to hear more. Can you each share how you feel the audiences that you are serving are unique, maybe relative to the rest of the general public? Suicide is complex and each individual's experience is unique. How does your work address that uniqueness, or have you adapted that work to address that uniqueness?
I kind of look at it the other way around, that I think there's more unity in the depression than there is uniqueness. We've done our shows for sixth graders, for Marine Corps. We did a school in Wyoming that was 36 kids, 6th through 12th grade. Was 36 kids. That's how big the school was. And we used the same program. And it just seems that when we talk about this, it's much more unifying. And I don't see, every culture thinks our culture doesn't talk, our culture. And then when you listen to everybody, it's like, oh, nobody's culture talks about it. So I really do. I look at that the opposite, that we had a group. We're gonna do a show in New York, and there's been a lot of college students, and they were concerned. They're very sensitive. It's a very woke kind of group. How can you adjust your program? And I go, we don't adjust it. It really is the foundation of having conversation and everybody able to see that it really is. It's so much the same, more so than it is different for different cultures. Everybody thinks it's unique, but it really is just so universal.
Yeah, I definitely think that, there is some, kind of universality in this experience. With the group that I'm working with, tattoo artists specifically, and folks who get tattoos, we know that and I'm going to drop some research. I can't help it. I'm a researcher. We know that, folks who have tattoos, we see higher rates of suicide, higher rates of self-harm, higher rates of mental health issues. It's a correlation, not causation, obviously. And we also know that tattoo artists, tattooing as an industry, there are higher rates of suicide in that group as well. And so we have sort of this group that, again, has higher rates of suicide for one reason or another. We also know that people who lose someone to suicide, and Kim, I just really appreciate you sharing your story. Sometimes folks get tattoos to memorialize that loss, or folks get tattoos to sort of show meaning to their own struggles with suicide or even mental health challenges. And so again, we have a group of folks that, may have some pretty significant lived experience. And so I think one of the really powerful things that we can do in this space is to help folks sort of lean into and leverage that personal experience, leverage maybe what has worked for them in the past when they've struggled, and then be able to sort of bring that forth to others who are struggling. So I think, people across, races, ages, genders, sexes get tattoos, but I think there is sort of that one, that opportunity to make that connection with another person when you're sort of in a vulnerable space of experiencing pain through a tattoo, and maybe that pain is due to something that you've experienced, and again, you want to memorialize that. So I think that's kind of how the group that I work with is unique.
I'm so interested in your research, Sara, because when my brother died, I actually had a tattoo appointment scheduled, and I wanted to to turn it. It was like a week before. I wanted to turn it into a memorial tattoo, and the artist, he kind of talked me out of it because he was like, Kim, if you want to do a memorial tattoo for your brother, which I eventually went on to do, he's like, you want it to be the one that is the one that you want. Don't add to this that you already had planned. And I was like, and I'm grateful, but I did have him sneak his initials in there anyway. But the audience that I get to work with are obviously, those who have been impacted by suicide loss. And what I know to be unique about this, and I've worked with them, for most of the years that I've been doing this work. And what, suicide doesn't discriminate, right? So, literally all different types of families, all different, just sort of every demographic, every, socioeconomic class that you can think of has been impacted, and our hearts break, right? Our hearts break the same way. But what's interesting is that, this grief, I would never say grief after suicide loss is worse than any other type of loss. I don't know that to be true, and I don't want to find out, right? But I know that it's complicated. I know that it comes with some complicators that it's just some added layers that other types of losses, and even from my own experience, I am an expert in no one's grief but my own, right? Even my other losses, John's death is just more complicated. There's just more stuff to navigate. There's more stuff to think about. There's more stuff to kind of, more puzzle pieces to try to form a puzzle. And it becomes very isolating. And, what I know to be true is that when suicide loss survivors are able to connect with each other, and this is probably a function of, anything traumatic that human beings go through, if we can connect with others who have experienced a very similar thing. All the details don't need to match up, but if we can connect with others who have, either are still walking that road, they're just a little further down that road than us, they are still standing. Usually their hair looks pretty brushed, their teeth look brushed, and their shoes usually match. So they are proof positive that it's survivable. And they are, walking, living, breathing examples of hope. And especially in the very beginning of this grief, you don't have that. You're not sure. I remember distinctly thinking, I don't know how my family is how are we going to do this? What's the future going to look like? How do we, there's just so many of those unknowns. And so I know that, this unique aspect of these people's lives that I get to be a tiny, tiny part of, I know that connection, that peer connection is, there's something magical about it. And just the fact of having someone say, yep, me too.
Oh.
That alone can be so validating and so affirming and healing too. So
Sara and Kim, I wish we could all sit in a room together for a day. I love what both of you are doing. We're all on the same page in the same program, and just have such unique ways. I've got my semicolon tattoo on my forehead, on my forearm. I've got my 1 degree of separation tattoo, and I would love to have our 5 questions in the hands of these tattoo artists to have tools to use. And I love, Kim, my heart's with the military. I've got family that's military, and so many of our events we go to, our board of directors has 2 people who've lost a child and a husband to suicide, and it's just I love it. Would be awesome to do some kind of collaboration for sure. We have to exchange information and see how we can find some ways to work together, because I would love to have, Kim, your resources at our events, because we teach people how to talk, but we tell them, don't talk to us. You need some sources to talk to. And what a perfect match with what you're doing with all these military events. So definitely we all need to have your people contact my people and all that. So
we're starting to get a lot of kind of specific questions about like the projects, which I mentioned, but I do want to ask a question that I feel like is about the conversation itself. So kind of the meta question. What are your thoughts that while we have really expanded conversations about the umbrella issues of mental health, we've yet to really create the same level of conversation about suicide and suicide prevention? And in your mind, is that distinction important, the distinction between suicide and suicide prevention and overall mental health?
I think it's really important because I firmly believe that suicide is not just about mental health. I'm a public health person, and I firmly believe that I don't want to minimize the importance of mental health in suicide and suicide prevention for certain, but I think we need to push things upstream and our conversations upstream a little bit. And that can be really hard to, number one, sort of wrap our heads around, and number two, to change anything. I'm talking about things like policies and systems that need to change. We know that for example, some of these kind of policy, culture, systems level factors influence suicidal behavior. But again, it's really hard to talk about. It's sort of, and again, it's hard to fix, right? These are really, really big things: systemic racism, discrimination, minimum wage, unemployment, housing, big things contributing to suicidal behavior, all of which, of course, influence a person's mental wellness. But the conversation is bigger than mental health. I feel like I could, this is kind of where I get on my soapbox. But I think that, that's kind of, I guess, my response to that question.
Ryder Kim, do you have thoughts about, is the conversation about mental health and the conversation about suicide and suicide prevention, do they need to be separate conversations? Or are they different conversations? Do people have different comfort levels?
I think the beginning is conversation. I mean, if there's conversations, then that'll lead to more. And that's kind of our, we have a very narrow bandwidth of what we deal with. We don't do counseling. We want people to there's so many steps to dealing with suicide prevention, and versus to talk about it, getting help, might be therapists, might be medications, everything else. But the first step is to talk about it. And that's what we deal with. And we have a very narrow bandwidth of what we do. And so that's the beginning of it. And from there, that's what professionals are for. And that's what, the black box, having these therapists to be able to take it to where it is. It's funny. I never thought I had depression because I always thought that's sad people. Right. And I wasn't sad. I thought of suicide. I attempted multiple times, but, and it was just finding out that, not everyone with depression thinks of suicide. I thought that was universal. But it's the conversation is the beginning of it. But yeah,
I like the question, because I think about, yes, the more and more we talk about mental health, but are we not talking about, the sort of the meat of it, right? And I fully agree. Not everyone who deals with suicidality is necessarily dealing with, a mental health diagnosis but I wonder if it's a way to sort of beat around the bush, right? That we I get it. Suicide is scary, right? It's scary as all heck. And my family looked relatively normal, and it happened to my family. So if it can happen to my family, it can happen, right? I get it. It's scary. But I wonder if, if it's just sort of a vanilla way to kind of not really get into it. And I wonder what we're missing because of that, if we're afraid to talk about it. We're certainly afraid to talk about even grief, right? And everybody knows someone who dies. It's and we're a very grief avoidant society. So, I wonder, if we're just staying a little bit too safe, maybe, but better than it used to be, right? I mean, conversation is good regardless.
Kim, if I can pivot us a little bit, we've had a couple questions come in about the Black Box project. First, it is they want to know a little bit about kind of the data that's being collected. Are you collecting data qualitatively, quantitatively? Like, what are the points that are getting pulled out?
Yeah, I am not the tech side is not my strong suit. I just will give you that caveat first. But things we're looking at, I can give you an example of the first round of devices that we sort of built our basic first analysis on. We do not connect the devices to the internet at all. So we're not logging into any apps. We're not looking at anything like that. But that first round of devices was 19 devices worth of data. And which doesn't sound like a lot, but that was over 500,000 text messages. So, and it was, all those were all military decedents, right? So all people who either were actively serving or had served in their lifetime. what we were looking at in the text messages and outgoing communication, so, emails, text messages, was sentiment. So we analyzed that chunk of data for sentiment and changes in sentiment and things like, changes in perhaps self-depreciating language. Interestingly enough, because that was a military, sort of sample, we were working with Amazon Web Services at that time, and we we had to teach them some sort of military culture and language because the F-bomb doesn't carry the same weight in the military community that it does in the civilian world. So we had to teach them that, but we were looking for changes in sentiment, right? Things like that. We also, something that we saw was evidence of sleep deprivation. Now, that's not news to people in the suicide prevention field, because we know when people are struggling, they may be struggling with sleep. But what that does show is, as an example, if I'm a clinician, and this is future state, this is not now, right? We are not in the business of developing an app. Might we in the future? I don't know. But, say we did, right? 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we develop an app. The clients that we care for, they knowingly download the app. That app, it doesn't monitor perhaps what someone is doing on their device, but that they are doing it, right? So if I'm not sleeping and my device shows activity 4 nights in a row that I'm up from 12, midnight to 6 a.m., and my clinician knows I don't work the night shift, that's evidence of me not sleeping, right? And that my shift, my sort of normalcy is off. That clinician may not wait until the next appointment 2 weeks from now. That clinician could reach out now. It's not, again, we don't necessarily need to know what someone is doing on their phone. It's just that they're doing, right? So those are some of the things that we are looking at. And again, we're open to, we have some hypotheses of what we may find, but we're really open to it because we just think that this is just going to teach us, so we don't want to be sort of boxed in by sort of we are applying what we know to be, indicators of risk, but we're open to what might be new information there too. So.
And kind of a follow-up on that, because you're talking about kind of how the data might be used. Something that a lot of folks are concerned about is, data privacy. What if, you're given a device and you're aware that the owner specifically did not want their data spread or used? Would that phone still end up with you? If you thought there's something that could be, useful in there, how would you proceed with that?
So we work with the families only, right? And so once someone, legally, once someone dies, and it's whoever sort of has possession of the device at that point, that's who we work with. I don't know that we would have any way to know if the person that died that, didn't want their data. I don't know.
It's a national.
Oh, sorry, Brad. I don't know that we would have any way to know that, but we do have, we inform the families of, okay, this is what we're doing with the data. When it's extracted, when it's copied from the device, that's by our digital forensics manager. He's got the same credentials that are used in law enforcement with digital data, and it immediately gets depersonalized. So no, we don't analyze any one singular device. That data immediately goes through that depersonalization and de-identification. Is that foolproof? Probably not, right? Because, I don't know that really anything is 100%, but anything that resembles a name, a string of numbers, that gets redacted, right? So it's, unidentifiable. And then it's all pooled. So, within that pool, again, we're not looking at, individuals. We don't track individuals within that pool. We're looking for those behavioral trends and patterns. And so, we let the families have as much informed consent that we can share with them. And if we were to ever share that data out, it's only the de-identified pool, right? Because once it's de-identified, we don't hold on to it. Once it's pooled, we don't hold on to it. And then that device goes back to the family. So I hope that answers most of the question.
I think so, yeah. Sara, since we're kind of talking about risk factors, this actually came up at a couple points in the chat. People want to know if there's any reason why there might be a correlation between, folks getting tattoos and risk for depression and suicide. Folks are speculating: is there a creative personality? Is it participation in an alternative culture? Are there any thoughts about why tattoos and suicide might be connected?
Yeah, and I would say all of the above. We know that suicide is complex, and you said that at the top of the stream tonight. So there's no sort of one answer, no one issue, obviously, that's connected. I did mention earlier that, folks who have experienced a suicide loss sometimes get tattoos to memorialize their loved one. Kim mentioned this earlier. Folks who lose someone to suicide have higher risk for suicide then. And so, there's that potential connection there. Certainly, I think, I wouldn't say that people that are creative, for example, have, a higher sort of disposition for suicide or anything like that. I have heard of tattooing, interestingly, referred to as kind of socially sanctioned self-harm almost, as sort of a way to sort of cope with symptoms of a mental health issue. If you've ever had a tattoo, you sort of get this endorphin rush at the end of it. You feel really good. And so, I think in some ways there's a little bit of potential coping that's built into that. Again, I also think that, tattoos often mean something to people. And I think if you're going to kind of go through that experience, you're getting a piece of art maybe that's meaningful to you that again has to do with your own mental health struggles or something like that. And so I think again, this is complex. I don't think we have that sort of correlation totally figured out. I think it's likely a number of different factors, including some of the factors that were mentioned by the folks who asked that question.
Thank you. And Brad, question for you.
Yeah.
You're talking to a digital audience right now, whether you can see them or not. Have you thought about expanding, or maybe One Degree does have an online presence, but have you thought about doing live shows, like say in a format like Twitch, and engaging with the audience in that way?
We've done some virtual events. There's a lot of value into being in person, but we've had a film crew following us for 2 years, doing a documentary. We would really like to have this be a TV series, because we use local comics when we travel, and every city we go to is a new group of comics that have their own news stories, their own background. We have a dinner together, and then we do the show. And so we put a lot of value on the live experience. We also signed a book deal, so we'll have a book coming out this next year, so that'll extend to a larger audience. But I'm not opposed to it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get that audience for digital, but yeah. And a lot of the events we do, they stream them. We'll do corporate events like VSP Global. They have 15,000 employees across the country, and we'll do an event at their headquarters and have them live stream it to their other audiences. But yeah, I would love to get in that space. I just don't know that much about it, how we go about it, how we get an audience and build all that. But our goal is the more people that see this, the better. So whatever it takes to do that.
Well, now you have some connections in the Twitch world just by being here with us today. So,
awesome.
So we have about 10 minutes left. And with that last 10 minutes, would love to hear, what message of hope would you like to share with the audience?
All right, I'll break the silence. I think one of the positive things of COVID is that there's this willingness and understanding to talk about mental health that there wasn't before. People that didn't have mental health issues got them, and people that had them got them worse. And so I can see such a drastic change in the mentality. The military is a slow-moving change organization. And I can see them taking us on and having us, the Navy, they're sending us out onto aircraft carriers now. And they're sending us all over the world because they see a need for just actively addressing this. And so, my dream is I have teams of comics all over the world that are doing this, and that we have comics that just work with colleges and with students and with military and whatever it may be. But I see such an expansion in this world. Let's talk about it. Let's find help and solutions for it. It just seems to be exponentially growing, this acceptance to talk about it. People who, that old school, if you talk about it, you're going to encourage it. Those people are vanishing from having that kind of attitude. And I see such a much more, and it's the 1 degree of separation. If you don't struggle, someone. And really, I see that everybody is connected to this. So that's my hope. And what I see is that there's just such a much more willing world to talk about and address it, and to try and find solutions, whatever those may be.
Thank you.
I think from a research perspective, much of the research around suicide for so many years was very kind of clinically focused. And again, I don't want to downplay the importance of that, but I would say in the last probably 10 years or so, research has really exploded around this space in a way that has gotten really creative. And we are starting to see, programs that are being implemented at the federal level, at the state level, that are starting to show positive effects in terms of suicide prevention. I also think I see a lot of hope with younger people. I have a 20-year-old, and actually, my son's having his 16th birthday party right now downstairs. So a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. And I see the willingness among those groups of friends to have conversations around mental health. Like, everyone is totally open to that. I'm not saying that, that's the case for every young person, but in my little circle, I see that willingness to talk about this, and I sort of see that almost rubbing off on parents and other adults in these young people's lives. I think another sort of really kind of specific moment of hope. Earlier this week, I was part of a Sources of Strength training. Sources of Strength is a great program for young people that focuses, again, on protective factors and strength. And it was a group of LGBTQ young folks who were the kind of youth peer leaders. And just like the absolute creativity of these young people in thinking about and developing campaign strategies for suicide prevention in their community just was like so incredible. So again, I think, I'm putting a lot of eggs in the young people basket. I see a lot of hope there. And, then again, from the research space, we're starting to see that creativity emerging in the research as well. And I think it's going to work. I think we have a lot of hope.
I think about hope from sort of both sides. From the prevention standpoint, I know that help does help, right? And whether it is, I think because we are talking about mental health so much more, and because I second what you say about young adults, Sara, because I also have 2 of them, and just their friends, their circles, it's so different. It's so different, and they are just open and supportive and understanding, and it's just so inspiring. But what I love is that yes, maybe the thing that's going to help someone the most right now is going to be a clinical avenue and therapy with a professional, or maybe right now in this season of their life it's going to be equine therapy, or it's going to be art, or it's going to be hiking, or it's like, I think that along the way, with opening up the communication and opening up the conversation around mental health, we have learned that there's no one size fits all, right? From folks in the staunch sort of prevention side, that can get a little confusing and hard, because they're like, well, wait a minute, we know the ways that are helpful. I think that we are starting to expand what we understand as what helps someone, and what honestly can help them through their whatever struggle they might be going through. That gives me a lot of hope. That gives me when sort of some of the don't let them see you cry camps, right? And unfortunately, or that is a lot military and veterans, and when I see those folks engaging in other types of again, art therapy or, sound baths. And, just, I think it's an amazing thing to be able to be open to things that, you just maybe never thought might help you before, but now they do. Another side of hope that I love to see is for those of us impacted by suicide loss. I think that, there is such an opportunity there. When suicide impacts us, when it happens to someone we love, someone we care about, we had no control over that. And choosing how we grieve, choosing how we honor that person in our life moving forward, what we say about it, how we talk about it, there is a little bit of empowerment in that when we make those choices. And I think it leads to post-traumatic growth because, being able to, I mean, not everyone has to change their career, go back to school, do ridiculous stuff like I've done. I probably wouldn't advise it. It doesn't have to be that, but what an honor for me, right? I get to talk about my brother all the time, and it's coming up on 15 years. I love that I get to do that, and people, I still get to say his name. It's great. But along the way, that has given me so much meaning in my life. It's become less about my grief and it's about my life, right? And I think that is incredibly hopeful because many times after traumatic loss, traumatic grief, it just you don't know where that's coming from. You cannot fathom, how am I going to rebuild my life? How am I going, what is this going to look like? And I think, again, the more we talk about mental health, the more we talk about grief and, and grieving and how it's normal. It's a normal response. We only grieve people that we love. The more we do that, I think the more we set the stage for that growth and hope to be there when we had no control. So
much. I want to give you guys some compliments that have been coming through in the chat. Everybody has been sharing hearts, emoticons, and all sorts of feedback. Thanking you, each of you, for your work and for the conversation, for being giving and kind with your time and your knowledge. So we want to extend that same appreciation. We also have a big compliment for Jen Owens. I should point this way, I think. And her work at Save for the past 12 years. She's leading a huge change in how Save as an organization approaches the grassroots and community-based approaches to suicide prevention, and her efforts to focus on getting to the nitty-gritty of suicide prevention is part of the same focus, as I've heard from each of you here on this panel today. So I wanted to really give Jen a huge shout out too, because she wasn't going to do it for herself. And I see in our shared document, she's typing, don't say this, but we're not going to listen to that. So big applause
What about me?
That's okay. We can give a compliment today too. A couple closing thoughts. Sara, we all got at least temporary Save and Raid tattoos for the event.
Cool.
There is a number of Save and Raid tattoos inspired by this event out there for real in the world. So I think a lot of people will resonate with the idea of, collecting something for the experience, to commemorate an experience. And as we're getting ready to take our audience to the next participant, lightning round, what are your favorite video games?
Stardew Valley.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
I just got into it, yes.
Mine too.
I'm too old. I don't do video games.
I
All my kids do. That's how my kids stay connected all across the country. And
Not even growing up. No arcade games growing up, anything like that.
Oh, it was lots of art, Space Invaders, and all
There you
that.
go.
That's how old I
Galaga.
am.
Totally counts. Totally counts.
Galaga. That's all I got.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, for participating in this conversation, for being part of this event. We really appreciate it. We are going to be heading over to our next participant. Don't forget to check out saveandraid.org if you get lost and want to see where we are in the event. Merch is available there, along with information about Save, the event, donations, milestones, all of that good stuff. But again, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yes, thank you all so much and for your dedication to preventing suicide, and keep up the good work, and we can't wait to see what you all do next. So
Awesome. Thank you.